Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're patching in from around the world. I'd like to welcome you and thank you for sharing a precious 10 minutes of your time with me. My name is Leela Shanker. I am a lighting designer with Borealis Lighting Studio based in New York. And I was thrilled to be invited to participate in this Women in Lighting Global Gathering. Respect to Sharon Stammers and Martin Lupton for pulling together this format for a global conversation. It's really rare that we have an opportunity to participate in something like this. And it means a lot to me as a global citizen myself. It's in my DNA. I grew up in Sydney, Australia. My mother's Chinese, but grew up in Malaysia. My dad's Indian, but grew up in Singapore. And I've lived in Shanghai, Berlin, and now New York for about 10 years, which is where I got my Masters of Architecture and Masters of Fine Arts Lighting Design. But my mongrel past aside, we are all members of a global lighting community that is on the precipice of a really exciting time to figure out our impact on the environment and communities through understanding better our embodied carbon footprint and what we can do to move towards circular economy design principles. So that is where I'm coming from with the title of this presentation, Owning It. When we think about scope in our projects, we generally think of the cost of fixtures and the delivery of sufficient light levels for particular kinds of program, as well as achieving a design intent from an experiential and aesthetic perspective. There are an increasing number of manufacturers and designers who are recognizing that the scope of our designs actually is broader and includes the legacy of our choices on people and planet. So where we are, March 8, 2022, it's an exciting moment because we are here embarking on a new journey of analysis and research in terms of supply chain and product design. And it's also a new era of design priorities. We used to think about operational energy in our code requirements, and that was kind of the end of it. But now there's very much a desire with a growing number of professionals within the industry around the world to understand our design choices before and after fixtures actually are installed on site. And that involves measuring the materials and energy consumed in producing a fixture and disposing of it at the end of a design's life. And to explain a little bit more about these concepts in their most basic form, moving from a linear economy to a circular economy means thinking up front about how to recapture materials along the stages of a life cycle of a luminaire, and try and reduce the amount of material waste through innovation, and instead recapture material in a new product or service. Reducing embodied carbon is really about accounting for the carbon emissions associated with the production, use, and disposal or recycling of fixtures. So we can own it if we understand it. And to understand our impact, we really have to take the first step, which is measurement. So we have to understand how to measure the status quo and then compare the impact of different fixtures being specified and different layouts being used. So at this point, the lighting industry is very new to all this, but the good news is that we are part of a conversation that's been going on for many years in other sectors of the construction industry, and we can look to what has been implemented within existing frameworks for analysis, life cycle assessment, and reporting. Environmental product declarations are an established international framework that gives us the information that is relevant and is directly feeding into existing green building frameworks. So you will find, as many of you may also know, that you can have credits under LEED, credits under the Living Building Challenge, credits under the Living Product Challenge if you use fixtures and components that have environmental product declarations on them. And that is third-party verified information about the impact of a fixture over the different stages of its life. In addition to that, one of the metrics that comes out of EPDs, as they're called, is global warming potential, or GWP. We are not so familiar with this metric, but we could become so, and it is a measure of carbon emissions in kilograms of CO2 as a result of processes across the full life cycle of the fixture and design. And if we work as a global community, we can, I believe, have a consistent approach to analysis of different fixtures so that we can actually compare them side by side and not have confusion over interpretation of the rules that were applied, or have to understand many different territories' versions of this approach. It should also lead to a reduction in compliance costs for manufacturers who are playing across different markets, and also lead to product innovation, which is exciting for all of us. So in thinking about where to start, sometimes we think, well, it's just me or just you. But I want to say you are not alone. You have allies around the world. One organisation that I've been really proud to be part of is the GreenLight Alliance. They are a global platform of lighting professionals that are committed to actually figuring this stuff out together, sharing case studies, sharing information, and starting to take a position on what seems sensible and achievable in terms of life cycle assessment and reporting. So with that, very excited to say that in a matter of weeks, we will be launching the life cycle assessment Incubator, which includes designers and manufacturers taking the leap from North America, Europe, Asia, Australia, South Africa, and Latin America. And this will result in a global conversation around gathering data in a consistent way. And we will end up with 5 industry average EPDs on 5 different types of luminaires. And that data will then be applied by designers into different real life projects, typical spaces, taking a look at how different strategies have different outcomes with this new metric. And for anyone out there who's curious about it, wants to know more, wants to participate, we would love to hear from you. So please do reach out. At the same time, there is already a lot of really exciting work that's being done by leaders, women who I really want to celebrate and take a moment to celebrate, to shout out. You know, and this goes to show that it is possible to take steps within your own practice if you feel compelled to. So Melissa Mattis and Reiko Kagawa at Slade & Feinstein in Massachusetts, up in Boston, have taken upon themselves to conduct research with their partner sales reps and manufacturers to understand the current status of material transparency for each of them. Similarly, Alexandra Godowski from HMFH Architects, who is the co-chair of the IES Sustainability Committee, along with Melissa Mattis, is taking a global perspective, along with all the other distinguished members of that committee, to incorporate or at least consider what is coming out of Europe through TM65 and TM66 on embodied carbon and the circular economy conversations respectively, and think about how that could apply in a North American context. Prior to that, we've had Megan Lewis from the Carbon Leadership Forum and Star Davis from WeWork, both of whom I worked with and were incredibly supportive in starting to investigate embodied carbon impact of lighting fixtures. And Elaine Cook from Moxie Lighting and Barbican, who was the first before me to start to participate in the Carbon Leadership Forum New York chapter and the AIA Committee on the Environment. So go and have those conversations with your local industry committees and ask the questions of the people you work with, because it really does count and it really does go somewhere. And I'm proud to say that also I'll be working with Kate Hickox from the Pacific Northwest National Lab on new life cycle assessment studies that will kick off in March as well. Very excited about that. And shout out to Brooke Silber, who is the Director of Lighting at Borealis Lighting Studio and has stood up to say we are going to include embodied carbon information in our Revit family parameters, and we will draft specification language for projects that actually have ambitious energy goals to support specifying fixtures that have life cycle assessment information and material transparency information. All really exciting stuff. And I want to, end by encouraging you to step over this imposter syndrome that some of us grapple with. It is crippling, this idea that we don't have sufficient experience or status in the industry to be asking the questions that we have or to be embarking on finding the answers. But to that I say, you are qualified to understand the impact of your design strategies. You are qualified to follow your instinct, to actually understand areas of your practice that you don't think you really have a full grasp of, but you should. You are qualified to have conversations with manufacturers about the data you would like to have and would like to work with them on to acquire. You are qualified. And most definitely to participate in a global conversation about how we as a lighting industry can reduce our carbon footprint and work towards innovation to implementing more circular economy design principles. You are absolutely qualified. I really do believe that if we work together as a global community in lighting, we can find frameworks and approaches that will work in harmony with each other across territories. And I leave you by saying you have all the potential you need to start asking the questions and finding the solutions. Let's own it.